The Committee on Homeland Security, Subcommittee on Transportation Security will come to order. The subcommittee is meeting today to determine and examine the fiscal year 2017 budget of the Transportation Security Administration. I now recognize myself for an opening statement. Terrorists remain committed to attacking the West, and every day these groups are recruiting new soldiers to their cause. As 9/11 fades from the memory of many Americans, it is incumbent upon Congress to look at tragic recent events and recognize just how committed our adversaries remain to attacking us. The harsh reality is that there are formidable new threats to the safety and security of the traveling public, and it is incumbent upon this committee to ensure that the Transportation Security Administration has the resources it needs to protect the American people against those threats, and that it spends those resources in an appropriate manner. At the very beginning of my tenure as chairman last year, we witnessed a marked increase in the public visibility of access control and employee vetting gaps at airports across the country, with the revelations that aviation workers were involved in weapons and drug smuggling and abusing their access to secure and sterile areas of airports. Then, in June, we learned of disturbing covert testing results from the Department of Homeland Security's Inspector General on the effectiveness of passenger screening checkpoints. Further, we saw a tragedy with the downing of a Metrojet flight over the Sinai Peninsula, which by most accounts was caused by a bomb likely planted by ISIS. Finally, we saw a number of threats against aviation surface transportation systems across the globe due to increased threats posed by extremists and foreign fighters, and a near tragedy aboard a Dalo airline flight in Somalia. Today, we will look at how the resources requested in the President's budget will mitigate these threats and make TSA a stronger and better organization. Amidst a heightened threat landscape, today's hearing will examine the recent budget request submitted to Congress by the TSA for fiscal year 2017. This hearing is a critical element of the subcommittee's oversight of the TSA and an important opportunity for Congress to provide feedback and input on the direction the agency has taken. As a subcommittee with primary jurisdiction over TSA, we have a front row seat to the challenges and obstacles facing the security of our nation's transportation systems. While I am heartened at a number of important steps taken by the recently appointed administrator of TSA, Admiral Pete Neffinger, I remain concerned that the sheer size and scope of the challenges facing TSA as an organization amidst a proliferating threat environment. Because of this, I'm eager to learn more about TSA's proposed budget for the upcoming fiscal year and how the agency plans to use its resources efficiently to better secure our transportation sectors. The reality is that we must never become complacent in our attempt to stay on the cutting edge of threat mitigation, and it is particularly incumbent upon this committee to remain steadfast in its oversight of TSA so that the American people can be confident that they can travel safely and securely. Moreover, I would like to better understand how TSA will continue to enhance its training and intelligence sharing efforts with its own employees, industry stakeholders, and foreign partners. I'm also interested in learning more about developments in TSA's PreCheck program, which is a vital part of advancing risk-based security screening at checkpoints. TSA has to be right 100% of the time, and the terrorists only have to be right once. With a challenging and ambitious mission, this subcommittee stands ready to continue helping TSA in their efforts to obtain the necessary resources to keep the traveling public safe from a wide array of threats to their security. However, we also intend to provide critical oversight of TSA in an effort to avoid instances of waste, fraud, and abuse of taxpayer dollars in the upcoming fiscal year and in years ahead. With that, I now recognize the ranking member of the subcommittee, the gentlewoman from New York, Ms. Rice, for any statement she may have. Ms. Rice?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to thank Chairman Katko for convening this hearing, and I want to thank Administrator Neffinger for coming to talk with us about the Transportation Security Administration's budget request for fiscal year 2017. All of us here today recognize the importance of TSA's mission, and it's imperative that we make sure that TSA has the resources they need to fulfill that mission and that those resources are deployed as effectively as possible. I have reviewed TSA's budget request and found aspects I agree with and a couple of aspects that I think warrant further examination. First, I'm pleased to see that the TSO basic training will continue at the TSA Academy at the Federal Law Enforcement Training Center's headquarters in Glencoe, Georgia. FLETC conducts law enforcement training for more than 90 federal agencies and thousands of state and local law enforcement agencies. And I think it's important for TSAs to know that they are being trained by the best at the same facility as officers and agents who are directly responsible for maintaining United States national security. I think it reinforces for new TSOs that the job they're training for is equally important to our national security. It's a job that our government and the American people value, that we rely on, and that we're willing to invest in. Last year, this subcommittee held a hearing to assess the current state of the Federal Air Marshal Service. We learned during that hearing that FAMS has not had an incoming class since 2011, and their attrition rate has increased. That was troubling to many of us, so I'm glad to see that some of those concerns have been resolved, and there will be a new FAMS class this year. Of course, we know that in addition to aviation security, TSA is also responsible for protecting several modes of surface transportation. The U.S. now sees more than 10 billion passenger trips on mass transit systems each year, and nearly 800,000 shipments of hazardous materials every day. We've seen evidence in recent years that ridership on mass transit systems continues to grow even as gas prices decline. So I was struck by the fact that this budget request seeks only a $12 million increase in funding for surface transportation. I think the attempted attack on a high-speed train in France last summer served as a reminder to all of us that securing our surface transportation systems is just as important as securing our aviation systems. The threats are constantly evolving and equally deserving of our full attention. Following that attempted attack, we held a hearing to evaluate how we are safeguarding our surface transportation systems against evolving terrorist threats. And it was during that hearing that one witness testified that the greatest threat to surface transportation systems is the fact that they are, quote unquote, wide open, that they are more susceptible to attacks and thus one would think more attractive as a target for terrorists. Another witness stated that reduced grant funding would have a drastic effect on the many transportation systems that rely on these additional funding sources, and yet TSA has not found the need to seek significant funding increases for surface transportation security in this budget request. I know that you will do your best to answer those questions, Administrator Neffinger, and I look forward to hearing that. I'd also like to talk to you about why TSA continues to request funding or has not cut funding for their behavior detection program, which at the time of the 2013 GAO report had cost $900 million since 2007, and yet has not, to my understanding, been proven totally effective. I say these, I address these concerns. I'd like you to address these concerns given the fact that we're approaching a summer season that we expect to be one of the busiest we've ever seen, with some of the longest checkpoint waiting times we have ever seen. So I think that raises a serious question of why would TSA want to use their resources and manpower on a program that has not yet proven effective. Also, last week the subcommittee held a roundtable with security manufacturer stakeholders to discuss the budget request. And one thing that emerged from our discussion was that there seemed to be discrepancies between TSA's strategic 5-year technology investment plan and the fiscal year 2017 budget request. And that's another thing I'm sure that you are going to address as well, Administrator Neffinger. Thank you again for coming. Mr. Chairman, thank you again for convening this hearing, and I look forward to a productive dialogue today, and I yield back the balance of my time.
Thank you, Ms. Rice. The chair now recognizes the ranking member of the Homeland Security Committee as a whole, the gentleman from Mississippi, Mr. Thompson, for any statement he may have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for convening this hearing. I'd also like to welcome Administrator Neffinger for appearing before the subcommittee today. Mr. Administrator, your leadership and vision at TSA is greatly appreciated. You and I share the goal of moving TSA in a better direction. In your budget request, there are areas that are encouraging and show that resources, which seem to shrink year by year, are being allocated to programs and areas where they are most needed. On the other hand, there are areas that are cause for concern. One such area involves the Transportation Security Acquisition Reform Act and your plan for technology acquisition in general. The act, of which I was an original co-sponsor, was signed into law in December of 2014. It requires TSA to develop and inform biennially a 5-year technology investment plan that includes justification for acquisitions as well as performance baseline issues. The strategic plan, which was introduced in August 2015, was lauded by security technology manufacturers as it provided a roadmap for technology priorities of TSA. These stakeholders could then allocate their research and development resources toward projects that align with the mission and intentions of TSA. This is especially important to small businesses who attempt to compete in this space, who do not have the capital to develop technologies that they believe meet existing needs at TSA, only to have the agency in midstream go in another direction. And as a small business, you can understand what that would do for the majority of them. We were shocked to learn, however, from stakeholders that the budget request did not align with the acquisition schedule contained within the 5-year plan. For instance, within the 5-year strategic technology plan, TSA indicates its intention to acquire 897 enhanced metal detectors for checkpoint screening and no intent to purchase boarding passes, pass scanners, or credential authentication technology systems. In the budget request, however, there is no intent to procure the enhanced metal detectors, and that fund will be used to purchase 625 credential authentication technology systems and 175 boarding pass scanners. Another area of great concern is the staffing levels at our nation's airports. And I think you're aware that a number of airports have already sounded the alarm that come this summer, unless some modeling is changed, we can expect significant wait times at airports. And I'm sure you've seen the letter from the Atlanta airport director, which I think is kind of where I'm coming from. I want to see how you plan to address that. That's a real problem. Because he has some options, and I would prefer those options not be utilized, and we can maintain a federal workforce in its present form. The Federal Air Marshal System. I'm glad that we have a new class underway. With our ranking member here, I want you to understand that 5% female air marshals is just not enough. I think we could enhance the recruitment to do that, and I look forward to hearing your answer on that. Mr. Chair, I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. I appreciate your interest in the committee and in the oversight of TSA. All right, our members of the committee are reminded that opening statements may be submitted for the record. We are pleased to have with us, once again, a distinguished witness, the Admiral Neffringer, on this important topic. He currently serves as a 6th administrator of the TSA, where he leads security operations at more than 450 airports within the United States and a workforce of over 50,000 employees. Prior to joining TSA, Administrator Neffringer, and Admiral Neffringer, as I'd like to call him, served as the 29th Vice Commandant of the U.S. Coast Guard and the Coast Guard's Deputy Commandant for Operations. The Chair now recognizes Admiral Neffringer to testify.
Good morning, Chairman Katko, Ranking Member Rice, Ranking Member Thompson, and distinguished members of the subcommittee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today on behalf of the President's Fiscal Year 2017 budget, which includes $7.6 billion for TSA. Thank you also for the support that this committee has provided, certainly during the 8 months of my tenure. This budget provides funding to sustain and strengthen the critical mission of TSA, protecting the nation's transportation system and ensuring the freedom of movement of people and commerce. Transportation underpins the entire economic health of this country. We depend upon it, and protecting it is one of the most important services our government provides the American people. It is now 8 months since I joined TSA on July 4th of last year, and of the many positive impressions, the most profound is the one I've gleaned from our workforce. TSA's nearly 60,000 security professionals are dedicated to a demanding and challenging mission, and they are our most important resource. They are incredibly patriotic and passionate about our counterterrorism mission, and they will deliver excellence if properly trained, equipped, and led. This budget is a modest increase over last year and will enable TSA to more fully renew its focus on security effectiveness. It annualizes the investments made in our frontline workforce, our screening technology, and the new TSA Academy, and sets the foundation for the transformation of TSA into the professional counterterrorism and security agency the American people deserve. I would like to thank this subcommittee for its commitment to our mission and for holding frontline staffing levels steady in the face of dramatic increases in passenger volume and a dynamic threat environment. This budget also enables us to hire air marshals consistent with a risk-based concept of operations, modestly increases our intelligence capability, and invests further in the TSA Academy. We have made great strides in addressing the challenges faced last summer. To ensure we do not repeat past mistakes, determining root causes of the problems identified has been my utmost concern. Delivered in a classified report to Congress and this committee in January, we concluded that strong drivers of the problem included a disproportionate focus on efficiency, environmental influences that create stress in the checkpoint operations, and gaps in system designs and processes. I'm proud to report that we have refocused on our primary mission. We have retrained our entire workforce, corrected procedures, improved our technology, and analyzed systemic issues. We are emphasizing the values of discipline, competence, and professionalism in resolving every alarm, and I'm confident that we have corrected the immediate problems, and I'm also confident that TSA is able to deter, detect, and disrupt threats to our aviation system. TSA will continue to partner with the airlines, with airport operators, and the trade and travel industry to identify solutions that can reduce stress on the checkpoint. And we must continue to right-size and resource TSA appropriately to ensure that we continue to be responsive to the public we serve. Moving forward, we're guided by a principled approach that is central to successful enterprise leadership. We are intensely focusing on the central unifying purpose of TSA, which is to deliver transportation security. We're aligning our strategic guidance, our operational plans, our measures of effectiveness, system design, and performance evaluations to this core purpose. The unity of effort that I expect is memorialized in my administrator's intent, which I published in January. I've provided copies to this subcommittee. Mission success is built on a shared understanding of objectives, unity of purpose, and alignment of values and principles. My intent articulates those objectives, the approach we will pursue in accomplishing our counterterrorism mission, and the values and principles that define TSA. Simply stated, we will focus on mission, invest in people, and commit to excellence. Our self-examination also gave us insight into imperatives for change and how we must evolve. We must adapt faster than the enemy, we must invest at the pace of the threat, build resiliency into operations, and do so in a rapidly growing sector of the American economy. We are undertaking a series of foundational efforts, including a comprehensive assessment of our acquisition system, building a planning, programming, budgeting, and execution system, developing an enterprise-wide human capital management strategy, reviewing our staffing model to ensure operational focus and agility, and fielding an agency-wide training strategy which includes new officer training, continuing professional education, and leadership training and development. We're rethinking how we invest in technology, and we're partnering with several airlines and airports to develop and install in the near future a dramatically improved passenger screening environment in a couple of key airports. Of utmost importance, TSA must remain committed to the values that public service demands, and I have challenged our leaders at every level to commit themselves to selfless and ethical service. As I discover questionable policies or unjustifiable practices, I will fix them. I demand an agency that is values-based and infused with character from top to bottom. This is my solemn duty and is what the American people expect of their government and those in whom they entrust their security. Many profound and important tasks lay ahead for TSA, but I believe we are on a sound trajectory, and I'm not optimistic about our future. As I have relayed in my intent, we will focus on mission, invest in our dedicated workforce, and commit to excellence in all that we do. I thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you, Admiral Neffinger. I appreciate your being here today, and I now recognize myself for 5 minutes of questions. As I've said on many times and in many different scenarios, TSA was born out of a tragedy, that being 9/11. And it was an agency that was cobbled together to address deficiencies with respect to airport screening and security at airports in general, and across this nation and other areas as well. It appears to me, and it appears to everyone, that there is a lot of growing pains within the agency and administration, but it also is apparent that you're the right person for the job. And I commend you on the job you have been doing. You've been doing a wonderful job, and there's a lot more we need to do. With that being said, I want to delve right into some of the questions that I have, because my old days as a prosecutor, if you didn't ask a question right away, the judge would smack you, so I'm not prone to making long statements. So I'm looking up at the screen here. As you see, there's There's some discrepancies between the planning and the what's being requested in the budgets and in the 5-year plan. The 5-year plan was instituted to force TSA to have a blueprint going forward, and part of it was because of procurement issues that they've sustained. And it seems like there's some anomalies here, and in no particular order of importance, I'd like to kind of take a look at these. One thing that jumps out to me really is the enhanced metal detectors. They submit a plan to us in August, the 5-year plan. They testified to it in January, talking about these things. It's in the 2016 request, and now for the procurement for 2016, there is 0. In 2017, there's only 70. Can you explain that?
Chairman, I had the same question when I saw this, because as you know, that plan came out as I came on board and was developed. It was developed to, as I understand it, to fiscal year 14 baseline numbers across the department. So that's one challenge, is that you're building it to numbers that are in the past. The basic answer, and it's an answer that makes sense to me, although it's challenging to parse it all out. But the basic answer is that you've got a couple of things going on. First of all, we took a look at the existing state of metal detectors across the system. As it turns out, they're operating much more efficiently and effectively than were expected at this stage of their life cycle. Part of that is because they aren't used as often as they were before, now that we have AIT machines out there. So one aspect is you've got metal detectors that are operating to standards and they're performing well, and we haven't seen the maintenance costs go up. The second piece at work is the department is in the process of looking at strategic sourcing across the department for metal detectors. TSA is not the only component within the Department of Homeland Security that has a demand or a requirement for metal detectors. And so we've been asked to take a pause as the department looks at a strategic sourcing, and as that's being worked through, we put a pause on our procurement while we're waiting to see what the department comes up with. So that's the general response there. That said, I think the roadmap and the technology investment plan is sound. It does address the need to identify follow-on procurements for the metal detectors going into the future. And we're working right now with the department to re-baseline that so that we know exactly what we'd be purchasing.
I understand the answer, but I mean, just preliminarily, before I get into what I want to really follow up with, are these the same metal detectors, these new ones, are they the same technology, or are they enhanced, better technology than the ones that currently exist?
It's roughly the same technology. It's a little newer, and it might have some more advanced processors in it, but it does the same thing.
Okay.
What we're finding is that we're able to detect to the right standards with the current technology.
So the whole idea of this 5-year plan was for you to make some decisions, tell us about them, and it seems like this identifies one of the systemic problems at TSA, and that is, you say one thing and you do another. And I'm not saying you in particular, but the agency, and that's part of the concern that we have, and it's a concern we've had repeatedly from industry. So while their concerns are part of the equation, safety is paramount. But the concern I have is that the agency can't even stick to a 5-year plan that they come and give us to Congress, because within a few months they're changing it, and changing it quite dramatically. And then you look at the credential authentication technology. There's none in the 5-year plan, and all of a sudden, out of nowhere comes 1,100 in the 2016 procurement. So can you explain that to me?
Yeah, I think you're familiar with what that is. That's the ID reader that would replace what is currently done by a travel document checker. The big challenge with that is a system. As you know, we prototyped that in a couple of large airports last summer. Prototype or the pilot project went very well. It did exactly what it was supposed to do. But then we had a number of big data breaches in the federal government, the OPM data breach being the most egregious. That changed everything with respect to when you plug systems into secure databases. And so we've had to go back, and we're working very closely with the manufacturer to ensure that it meets the new cybersecurity standards and the cyber vulnerability standards that it has to meet before. And I personally believe that this is important that we do. I do not want to plug that into the secure flight database, for example, and not be certain that I can monitor whether or not somebody's trying to access it. So it set us back about 6 months or so on that project, because we have to install, there's software that has to be installed on each device to monitor the interactions that are happening, and then there's card reader that has to be put in for somebody to log into the device. It's actually on a good track, but as I said, it set us back about 6 months in that procurement, which is why it got pushed into fiscal year 16 and further.
All right, I appreciate that. When was that decision made to update these credential authentication technology devices? And was it made recently, or was it made 6 months ago, or?
No, it's been recently, because as you know, the department's been working on the approach to take to cyber standards and cyber vulnerability. The department has what they call a cyber sprint, which is a series of near-term measures that have to be taken to ensure that we are doing across the board, both in the government as well as in industry, the things that we need to do to protect, and we're part of that sprint. This falls right underneath that. So they're very interested in ensuring that systems that we plug into databases that are owned and operated across the government don't inadvertently make those databases vulnerable.
Okay. Lastly, before I turn my questions over to the chairwoman, the 5-year plan is supposed to mean something. And it was passed because it was a piece of legislation that was meant to force TSA to have a track. Now, they were just here a month ago, and then there's no mention of these things. So I would really appreciate it, and I would ask going forward that when people come to testify before Congress and there's major changes in the 5-year plan, that they notify us, because that's really important to help us know that we're given proper oversight. The 5-year plan is not something that can be ignored. And I would ask that moving forward that they take the 5-year plan with the seriousness with which it was passed into law. Okay?
Yes, sir. And if I can just add to that, one of the things, I concur with you completely, and my concern is that we bring you things that make sense and things that we can actually do. Concurrent with this, one of the things I've looked at hard since I've been on board is our current acquisition program across the whole spectrum. All of this is tied to the way in which you analyze mission, set requirements, and then post those requirements in a way that's responsive to the industry and the industry participation. I asked the Defense Acquisition University to come in shortly after I came on board and said, I want you to take a hard look. And DAU, as you know, is an adjunct to the Defense Department that takes an independent, objective look at the way in which federal agencies procure and acquire. I asked them to pull the covers off and see whether we're doing things as we should. My suspicion was that we had gaps and we had some places we could improve. I've just received their report. Not surprisingly, they identified that we had some gaps and some things we could do to improve. It ties directly to our ability to properly forecast and determine where we're going. As I said, I think the technology investment plan is a sound roadmap. But I think we need a better requirements generation process on the front end. So what I hope to do is come forward to the committee once I analyze that report that I got from the Defense Acquisition University and outline for you where I think we can make some dramatic improvements in the entire approach to acquisition.
Thank you, Admiral. The chair now recognizes the ranking member for 5 minutes of questioning. Ms. Rice.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Admiral, what is the agency doing to increase the number of people who actually go through the TSA pre-check application process? Because now that you're doing away with managed inclusion, the lines are going up. Now that need to kind of reach out to the public and increase the number of people who take advantage of this system is even more critical.
Well, thanks for that question. There's a number of things that we're doing, so I'll try to just highlight the categories of things. First is making sure that we've identified all the already vetted and cleared populations that we could bring into the expedited screening program, the pre-check program. So these are members, as you know, we have members of the military who hold clearances. We have members of Congress, members of other federal agencies. So we have expanded that population to what we think is the reasonable expansion with the extent to which we know people are vetted for security clearances. So that's the first thing that we did. We've also worked very closely with airlines, with airline associations, with the travel industry to improve their marketing of the availability of PreCheck. And there are a number of airlines that have done a superb job of doing that. So if you've flown on United recently, for example, you'll see on their in-flight entertainment system, there'll be advertisements for that. That has resulted, and we've worked with the existing vendor, which is the vendor that provides services in airports, to expand their opportunities to the extent possible to streamline the enrollment process. All of that has resulted in a dramatic increase in daily enrollments. So we're about double the daily enrollments this year than we saw at this time last year. So we've gone from about 3,200 daily enrollments to about 6,200 daily enrollments. So that's helped considerably. That puts a pre-check population now at around 2 million people. When you add in those vetted populations, already vetted populations, and the people who are part of global entry, that brings it up to about 9 million people.
So what number do you want to hit?
We'd like to hit 25 million. So that is considered to be the key number to dramatically change the way the system operates. We've also got a request for proposal that closed recently that sought opportunity for other private sector businesses to enter the enrollment opportunity process. So this would provide a number of different opportunities for private sector entities to come in, provide enrollment services. TSA always maintains the vetting of the individuals, but this would be the front-end enrollment, verifying their identity, verifying the basic documents and that sort of thing, and then providing us with the names. That process is going through bid evaluation right now, so we had a pretty robust response to that request for proposal. That's going through bid. Assuming all goes well, given the way in which the acquisition process works, we should be able to award by midsummer, which means that you could, conceivably before the end of the calendar year, have additional opportunities. And that would put it out in the retail environment so that you wouldn't have to necessarily go to an airport. You might be able to go to you might see it in a kiosk in a local shopping mall or a shopping center or something like that. So that's part of it. We're also working with, and I've been talking to my counterparts within the department, people who have other trusted traveler programs like CBP, to look to see whether we can conform our trusted traveler program with theirs more effectively so that it just becomes easier for people. I'm concerned that it's still a little cumbersome to enroll, and it's not always clear if you're enrolling in one, whether you're getting the other one. So we're looking to combine that, and the department right now is helping us to manage a little more unified approach. I think that we're on a good track right now, given the limited opportunities that are available. As you know, you can't enroll everywhere, and even if you try to enroll online, there's some challenges associated with that. But I'm encouraged that we're seeing a lot of growth. I think that people who were getting this through managed inclusion and aren't getting it anymore, that's been one of the biggest improvements to our marketing. They want to get back in that line. But it's not growing as fast as I'd like to see it grow, which is why I'm very interested in seeing if we can get this RFP bid determined soon and start offering these more opportunities. I think 2016 is going to be a challenging year still, but I think in 2017 we could see dramatic improvements, assuming that this opportunity presents itself in the way we hope.
So can you tell us what you're doing to mitigate threats to the surface transportation sector?
Well, as you know, surface is one where we don't have direct security responsibility, but we do set standards and we work very closely with them. I've got about a little over 300 people total that are dedicated to surface transportation across the nation. They work with about 1,000 different corporate entities and then a few thousand additional public entities that provide everything from school bus services to over-the-road buses, local rail, light rail, metro, passenger rail, and the like. So there's a couple of aspects that we have. You have an inspection program that works collaboratively with varying entities to set base assessments. There's a series of standards established for what a security program needs to look like. We inspected that. It's a voluntary program, but almost everybody participates. It sets a baseline assessment, and then they hold collaborative work to determine what needs to be done and how to target some of the improvements. There's also an exercise program that's run on a periodic basis to determine their readiness to respond to incidents. Depending upon the sophistication of the entity, I mean, you have some very sophisticated entities like the New York Transit System with the transit police and so forth, a very robust security program. That's one that you can actually take best practices from and port to other places. Amtrak has a very robust security program and the like. We also work.
But the communication between your agency and other agencies is good, and everyone understands that they need to.
I think so, and I have, in my travels, I meet with people in the surface world, and the overwhelming response I've been receiving is that they like the way we've been pushing information out to them. We have a pretty good sharing arrangement for moving intelligence in and out, both sensitive intelligence to the law enforcement agencies as well as tear sheets for the public or the private sector people that need information. The upside is that the overall threat environment is still relatively low, but we do modal assessments. I think we provide copies to the committee, but I'll make sure you have the latest round of intel assessments that we've done across each of the modes of the surface world. And although low doesn't mean no risk, but it means that you can, that if you can address what you know to be the key vulnerabilities across the system, that we can watch for developments that may pose a potential problem. We also work very closely with FEMA to determine the distribution of grants. So we help FEMA evaluate grant proposals or proposals for grant funding. Congress appropriated $100 million in FY16 for surface transportation grants. $10 million was directly for Amtrak. Another $3 million for over-the-road buses, and then the remaining $87 million is yet to be determined because those grant proposals are coming in right now.
So I'm way over my time. I just want to end by saying you've got one of the toughest jobs, but I appreciate your vision and your willingness to try to bring this agency up to the standards that we all expect it to be at. And I really can't think of anyone better to lead the agency than you, and I'm just echoing the chairman's comments of before. So thank you very much, and I yield back my time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Rice. I will note, with respect to the pre-check, that we had in my airport in Syracuse, they used to have to drive to 45 minutes north to Oswego, New York, to the port to get pre-check. And now we got a kiosk put in the airport, and it is jammed all the time with people signing up. So it's a perfect example of making it convenient for the traveler. It's going to work, and
Sure.
I dearly hope we get to the goal you're talking about. But it's a program that should be expanded. And it's going great. So, the chair now recognizes the ranking member of the Homeland Security Committee, Mr. Thompson, for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I'm glad you had a chart to go with my comments about the procurement plan.
Would you like to back up there?
No, I just want to reiterate to the administrator that, you know, we passed that. That's an intent of Congress for you to do that. And I think you have to get your team to follow the instructions of Congress. That's real important. The other thing is you ask for money to do procurements, but I'm wondering, a small business, how can a small business follow the procurement process? And at the end of the procurement, because they don't have a bottomless pit of money, what are you going to do to make sure that we don't unnecessarily deny small businesses an opportunity to do business with TSA?
Well, thank you, Mr. Thompson, for the question. As you know, you and I have had this conversation a number of times. I actually am very concerned and I'm very interested in getting as much competition and as much small business involvement as possible. My personal belief is that some of the most innovative and creative work being done, particularly in the area of software and hardware development in the security world, is being done in small businesses. So there's a couple things at play here. That acquisition university study I brought in is directly related to how well you can entice people to participate and how easy the participation is. So that's one piece of it, is to make sure that you have a front-end process that provides the incentive and the research and development incentive on the front end, tied very clearly to clearly stated requirements and capability gaps, and then hold small business seminars and industry seminars to determine it. So we've done a little bit of that already. I think there's more of that we need to do. But I am pleased that we have attained nearly all of our small business participation targets for this last year. I want to set a larger stretch goal for our targets, but I also want to find a way to incentivize more effectively, and we can do that. And actually, the DAU had I think some sound recommendations for how you build that into the way you do acquisition. So I look forward to providing a more detailed example of that. But met recently with a number of small business representatives, and I also met with the National Security Manufacturers Coalition, which included quite a few small businesses. They identified this as a challenge that they've faced with us for some time.
But you do understand that probably every member of Congress is approached by businesses in their
Yes, sir.
District wanting to do business, but they always talk about how complicated it is. And can you provide us the latest small business statistics?
I will.
With TSA that you just alluded to?
Yes, sir, I will.
I referenced the FAMS program, and that only 5% of the FAMS are female. Have you challenged your team to address that problem?
I have. As you know, part of the challenge has been we haven't been able to hire since 2011, so I thank Congress for the opportunity to begin to replace. I have the average age of FAMs right now is 43, and 30% or more will time out on mandatory retirement over the next 5 years. But the fact that we can hire this year gives us an opportunity to address this diversity problem. I know it's Director Rod Allison's #1 priority. So there's a couple things we're doing. We're marketing it internally in TSA under a Why Not You campaign, and we are especially targeting underrepresented groups and women. We think that there's an untapped resource out there that will find its way into this program if they have the opportunity. It's hard to overestimate how much you lose by not hiring for a period of time. Nobody even thinks about the FAMs anymore, and you have no opportunity to address this problem. But we have some targeted recruiting efforts going on right now that are targeting, as I said, underrepresented groups. What I'd like to do is provide you with that recruitment plan that we have, and I'll send that to the committee.
Please,
that you have that.
I would look forward to it. I would, and we will respond accordingly. Most agencies tend to recruit in the capital region.
This is a nationwide recruiting
Good.
pool.
The other thing I talked about was airports having put TSA on notice already about the summer months, the anticipated long lines, and they are asking TSA to look at it and provide some relief. What have you done to address those concerns?
Well, I think we've got a number of projects underway right now and a number of efforts underway. Let me underpin it by saying, we've seen record travel volume over the past couple of years, and Atlanta in particular, the airport that you're referencing, has seen a 14% growth in passenger volume just in the past year. That's on top of 10% the year before. So that's a challenge in anybody's book. It's a challenge for the entire system. That said, it's one of the reasons I asked to hold staffing steady to stop the further reduction of the frontline TSOs. As you know, we've come down some 5,600 people since 2011 in our frontline staffing. So we've held steady now, and I wanted to hold steady because I knew that the combination of focusing more effectively on our mission and moving people back into standard screening lanes was going to put a lot of pressure on the wait times. So what are we going to do in the near term? The larger story is we've got to get staffing right, and we're in the process of looking very hard right now. Within the next week or two, I'm going to get a number that shows a little bit more effectively what the staffing level should be to meet the challenges that we're facing. But in the face of that, you've still got to deal with what is going to be a very large travel season. So in addition to talking to personally, I've spoken with the CEOs of each of the major airlines. I convened a conference call about a week and a half ago of the top 20 airports, the airlines that service those airports, and TSA. And these were the operations managers, the people who are responsible for figuring schedules and the like. And we're putting an airport by airport at each of those 20 airports, by the way, represent about 85% of the daily population. So if you can get that right, you'll alleviate the problem. And we are looking at any way possible to mitigate collectively, to deal with this as a system instead of just a series of handoffs in the system. So that's the first step, is a true collaborative effort, airport by airport, and looking for any innovative solutions and then porting those around. As we learn best practices, we'll move it. If we have people who do things really well, then we're going to put teams together that will move from airport to airport to optimize. The other thing we're doing is I'm husbanding as much overtime resource hours as I can right now and pushing those into the summer. And we're front-loading our hiring so that we're hiring as fast as we can and we're pushing people through. We're adding classes to our new TSA Academy. We're running 8 concurrent classes right now. Starting every week, we started another 8 classes. So my goal is to do as much as possible given and hire to our staffing levels, our authorized staffing levels as fast as possible. I hope to get that done by before the summer season starts, and then deploy those people. And we're also targeting it to those airports where we know there to be the biggest challenges.
So your testimony is that now that you're aware of the problems, by summer you will have those problems addressed.
Well, we'll address them. I'm not saying that we're going to get it perfect across the board, because I think we're still going to have some challenges, but we're addressing those problems across the board. In fact, I'm going down to Atlanta next week to meet with the director of the airport and my federal security director to directly address some of those concerns. And I'll be bringing a team that will be evaluating how they do it. And so we've done that. We're doing a lot of work at Newark, JFK, Dallas, LAX, and the like. I think you're still going to see some increased wait times. I had to get better at the primary mission. Part of the problem that we had is we were actually moving people very effectively through the system, but we weren't actually doing our job well. So you had to do the job well, and that increased wait times by definition.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Carter.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Neffinger, for being here. I want to continue with the theme specifically for the Hartsfield-Jackson Atlanta International Airport. Mr. Neffinger, I hold in my hand the letter that's been referred to that was sent to you by the general manager of Hartsville, Mr. Miguel Southwell. In this letter here, he, of course, as you know, expresses concern about the long wait times and actually attributes it to an understaffing of TSA personnel and asks that to be addressed. Mr. Chairman, without any objection, I'd like to have this letter introduced into the record, if that's okay.
Without objection, so ordered.
So, Mr. Neffinger, you're aware of this letter, of course. You're familiar with it.
Yes.
Okay. Well, in that letter, Mr. Southwell actually says if there's not an increase in TSA personnel at the airport, that he will have no other choice but to apply for the screening partnership program. Now, the screening partnership program, it's my understanding that this committee has been working with you and working with TSA to try to get accurate cost estimates of exactly how much it would cost to implement this program and to run this program at the airports. Is that correct?
That is. As you know, GAO did a study recently
Yes,
in which they, and the general gist of that was the direct cost to TSA versus the additional costs associated.
Okay, but I'm not talking about TSA, or excuse me, about GAO's report right now. I'm talking about, are you working with the committee and trying to get cost estimates as to how much it would cost?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so you're working with our committee now on that, and that's very important. Do you have any idea when that'll be submitted, when that'll be finished?
To be honest, I think we're done with that now, so I don't think there's any reason why we can't. We've accepted the GAO recommendations, and we've changed the costing, the way we display those costs. I'm required by law to display the direct cost to TSA, but we've added what are called the imputed costs, the things that are outside the TSA budget but include.
So you've accepted GAO's report that estimated there would be a 17% cost savings on this if this were implemented, correct?
Well, what we've done is we've accepted their recommendation that we adjust the way we display costs so that we include those costs outside our budget, but still cost to the federal government.
But still, there would be a savings realized of about 17%.
Yeah, it actually runs from 2 to 17%, depending upon which airport they looked at. GAO said it's difficult to draw large conclusions because there's a relatively small sample group, but we've said that certainly in the first year, that's what they say.
Okay.
What they asked us to do was track it over time to see if those savings hold.
Okay, but
we're
with
doing
this in
that.
mind, with the fact that it will save in mind, are you encouraging this program?
If an airport wants to go into the screening partnership program, I have no objection to it, and in fact, one of the things I asked to do when I first came on board was to streamline that process so that it's transparent, it's available, and it's understood. Just the way in which the procurement runs, it takes about 18 months to go from request to contract award, but remember that the TSA awards the contract on behalf of, and they still have to work for the federal government.
I understand. Well, again, I didn't get the answer. I didn't, yes or no, are you encouraging airports to use this
Yes,
program?
well, I mean, we make it, if by encouraging you mean do we advertise it, we make it available, we tell people how it works, but
Okay.
that's...
Are you offering any kind of financial incentives to them to use this program?
I don't really have any financial incentives to offer.
Well, if you could save 17%, if you could save 17%, I mean, even if you offered them just half of that to improve their facilities at their airport, don't you think that would encourage them to use the program?
I'm not sure I have the authority to do that, but there may be some ways to incentivize it if we wanted to do so. I think my primary job is to ensure that we provide services at or below the cost that it would provide, that the federal services would be. Here's what I would say, though, regardless of whether you do it, the challenges are the same for everybody. Remember, it has to be at or below my cost. So I'm guessing
But
that
GAO has said that this would be below your cost. You would recognize the cost savings for it, and it just seems to me like
And
you
so
know, you
that's
would
available-
offer that incentive, that financial incentive to the airports. I mean,
well, I think the
this would
incentive...
help because obviously we got a serious problem. And listen, I can attest to it. I've recognized it personally. I have to stand in those lines at the Atlanta airport, and they are just terribly long. And we've got to have some relief here. And any time we can get the private sector involved, I'm all for it.
What I'll tell you is that we're seeing roughly the same challenges, whether it's a private or federal. The challenge is it's an arithmetic problem, but primarily. You got a lot of people traveling. You have more peak periods than we've had in the past, and you have a certain level of staffing that you can't get beyond.
And I accept that, and I know you do too, which means that we've got to try some different things.
That's
and
right.
This is a different thing. So what I want to know is this specifically: do you have personnel that are dedicated to this program, that are pushing this program?
I do. I have an entire office that handles the screening partnership program. I have a new person that has come in. It started just before I started, and has dramatically changed, I believe, dramatically improved the program, made it more apparent, more accessible, more understandable, streamlined, and and we respond to anybody who wants to know about it. In fact, I asked them to reach out to
and I know you
Miguel
respond
Southwell.
to it, but I want to. My hope is that you're marketing it as well. I mean, I would hope that you're pushing this program. It would seem, you know, again, we're looking for any way that we can cut lines, any way that we can save money and still do it efficiently and do it effectively.
Well, and that's it's a goal that I have as well. And there are a couple of things I mentioned in my opening statement that we're also looking at what I think are some very dramatic improvements we can make to the entire development of the screening environment, which will, it's really about how you process people through more efficiently while still doing an effective job of security. And I think there's some things that we can do that we're doing right now that will make a huge difference in that,
Okay.
whether or not you're private or public.
But including pushing this program, which is what I'm appealing to you. Okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Carter. The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Keating, for 5 minutes of questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Administrator. I just want to focus on something that I realize is an area of resources that are difficult, but you already addressed and I'm working on the issue of access to data by TSA, where there were 73 people that were on the Tide, database on radical sites, and I want to take that a step further. We had a hearing in Boston just this week, and Mr. Mellon was there representing TSA. But on the surface area issues, which I understand. Usually it's the local, security forces, the local transport forces that deal with that, not TSA employees directly. And they work with FEMA in that regard. But TSA is still responsible for the safety and security in those areas. One of the things that's a concern on the surface area, transport area, if you look at that issue, the 73 people that were identified and TSA didn't have the data, access to the data network with them. It's even more difficult when you're dealing with local area transport security forces because you're a step removed. And for rail and buses and the people that work around those areas, I have great concerns about the screening of those employees. And I'll take it even a step deeper than that. There's a GAO report September 2013 report, where they were looking at the contracting out, the private contracting out of services. And in that GAO report, they were talking about those private contractors were doing less training, and I suspect less screening. And I really think that's an area of great susceptibility. Now, I know you're stretched, and I know the way you currently operate, you're relying on those local transit authorities and to do that kind of work. But is there something we can do in terms of oversight? Because I look at vulnerabilities, and on surface area transport security, it's so accessible and it's mass transit, but one of the areas we do have control over are screening those workers that are there that have all this access, and access that could be dangerous in the wrong hands. So could you just comment or at least agree if that's an area of concern? If it is, maybe look at that area, even with diminished resources, even with the difficulty. I think that's a real area of concern.
Well, I would concur with you. That is, anytime you have a population that you need to trust, you need to have some means of verifying that trust. We directly concern ourselves with that for people who hold transportation workers cards, other credentials associated with those, as well as people in the aviation industry and access. We rely heavily, as you noted, upon state and local law enforcement to do some of that background vetting across the surface modes. What I will tell you is that it's of concern to us, and what I owe you is a fuller explanation of how we intend to continue to approach that and some of the things that we could potentially do in the future.
Great. I think it's just not an area of concern for safety in terms of terrorist activity. I think it's a real area in terms of basic safety, because that same GAO report talked about the lack of safety training, and it talked about the buses and the equipment, the assets they use, not being as safe either. So there's a way for us to do a little more oversight on that.
Well, as you know, DOT covers a lot of that with some of their oversight programs, but I think it implies a stronger linkage, perhaps, between what's being done in the safety world and what needs to be done in the security world as well.
If that's an area that you could provide the committee some more information on,
yes, sir, I will.
That would be grateful.
Okay.
We'd be grateful for that, and thank you for your hands-on approach thus far, trying to dig in and deal with these very difficult issues.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Keating. I just want to follow up with one area that hasn't been covered, which I anticipated that it was going to be covered, and that is the behavior detection officers. Could you tell me what is the budget for those this year?
The BDO budget this year, I know that we've come down by 15% from FY15 numbers, so we've reduced it by $33.6 million. Off the top of my head, I don't have the exact number for that. I know it's a reduction of $33.6 million over the FY15 number. What I'd like to do is talk to you about how I view that program and what I think that program is and can become going into the future.
Yeah, I guess I'm looking at it from the now that managed inclusion is kind of going by the wayside, which it should be. I'm wondering if some of those resources might be better allocated towards the high density airports and trying to get more staffing at those airports. Well,
and we're doing that, and that's one of the reasons for bringing those numbers down is to reallocate staffing to other frontline screening. But if you think about the screening environment in its total sense, there's a lot of things that are going on from the time you enter to the checkpoint queue to the time you exit, and there's a successive attention to detail as you come through, and kind of a decreasing attention or an increasing attention to detail as you're moving through the environment. There's sort of the general overview of the environment. You need somebody paying attention, some group of people paying attention to the general tenor of the environment. So how are people acting? What's it look like? You need an awareness of the activities in the environment. And then as you get closer and closer to the actual checkpoint, you need, or to the X-ray machine and the walk-through metal detector, the AIT machine, you want some very detailed attention paid to each individual coming through. So that's the whole idea behind how you layer in things like behavior detection. I don't like separating out that capability, and isolating it. I think that there's I spent a fair amount of time in Israel earlier actually at the end of the last year, because I wanted to look at the way they do behavior detection. So they embed that throughout their whole system, and there's greater or lesser use of the behavior detection techniques depending upon what your role is in the system. But everybody kind of has an awareness of it. So we've begun to do that, is to actually train behavior awareness to all of the people who work in the checkpoint environment. Because if you look at law enforcement agencies around the world, they all use some form of behavioral awareness testing and behavioral awareness detection. In fact, the program that we have was built with input from law enforcement agencies like the New York Police Department, the FBI, LAPD, the Israelis, and the like. And in fact, the Israelis have come back and given us some advice. We've also tried to validate that. In fact, recently sent a report to Congress, which I think does validate the science behind the behavioral indicators. It's not a 100% program, not intended to be. It's an indicator, and you look for certain types of behaviors. So, but you got to get the number right. And what we've done is we brought them in closer we've integrated them more effectively into the checkpoint environment. That's why I think you can bring the numbers down. I don't need them wandering around the airport. I need them paying attention to an environment in which you're trying to determine whether anybody at the last minute is trying to get past you and get something into the aircraft. So I think we're on a good trajectory with behavioral detection. I think there's some more adjustment that needs to be done. Again, what I asked was we came down by 15% in the numbers in the FY16 budget. I just want to hold steady as we look at the modifications that we're making to that program, because I think that it all plays into the way you staff more efficiently the checkpoint environment. I like having people paying attention to the broader crowd, and they make thousands of referrals a year that have resulted in hundreds of arrests, mostly criminal arrests, but the behavioral indicators for criminal activity are the same behavioral indicators for anybody trying to do something bad. So I'm comfortable that it has a sound basis. What I don't know is whether we got the numbers right yet, and as I mentioned to Mr. Thompson, I'm very concerned about our ability to address what I know will be a very challenging summer travel season.
Quick question for you. Is there, are they being implemented outside, or let me ask a better question. So as I understand it, the BDOs are being implemented just at the checkpoint, not throughout the airport, just at checkpoint.
There's still some use around. I mean, they serve on Viper teams, so they're moving around. Again, if you think about it, you're moving around, particularly the Viper teams that are doing the random inspection of badged personnel. That's, as I think I mentioned before, we've increased that by almost fivefold the number of inspections that we're doing within the airport environment. So we have some BDOs on that team because they're watching behaviors in and around the aircraft and the baggage handling areas and the like. So it's not solely there, but we have focused on the checkpoint with our BDOs for current.
All right, thank you. Ms. Rice has no further questions, but Mr. Keating may. So, Mr. Keating, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple of quick questions. One is the responsibility for staffing the exit lanes. How's that reflected in your 2017 budget request? Number two, and lastly, we've talked before about perimeter security, and you're going to dig into that issue. You said, is there any progress thus far to communicate to this committee on that?
I will note for the record that Mr. Keating's record is still intact and mentioned perimeter security at every hearing.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm glad you're keeping track, and I hope you're not alone in keeping track of this issue, because it dates back to the 9/11 Commission report. So if we could on perimeter security, see what actions you might have taken so far, and also what plans you have going forward in that respect. Those are the 2 points I wanted to.
On exit lanes, we're staffing to the lanes that were required by law to staff to. As you know, Congress passed a law that said you must continue to maintain exit lane staffing. So I don't have the exact number, but this budget reflects the requirement to continue to staff those exit lanes. We're also working with various airports to look at exit lane technology. Technological solutions to exit lane management that takes the human out of the equation, one-way doors and that sort of thing.
Yeah. So we saw some of that in a field hearing in Syracuse as well.
And there's some promising stuff out there. Not all of it's cheap, but there are some good solutions out there, and we're looking at trying to get those approved and on a list that could be used. With respect to perimeter security, there's actually a lot going on right now, and I think I hope you'll be pleased with what we're doing, and I pay attention to it, not just because you ask me questions about it, but because it's a real concern. As you know, last year, this was before I came on board, but in the wake of the incident in Atlanta and some follow-on, the Secretary had asked the Aviation Security Advisory Committee to take a look at specifically insider threat and perimeter security. And they came out with, among other things, some recommendations with respect to that. TSA, again, had put out a requirement to do some work with respect to reducing access points and the like. Personally, I wasn't comfortable with both the nature of that request as well as the response that we got. I mean, there was some good work done. It's not to suggest that people didn't take it seriously, but it wasn't really well defined. So over the past 2 months, and then ending at the end of this month, we're looking airport by airport across all the federal airports in the country. I put out a very detailed vulnerability assessment requirement. And so our FSDs, working with the airport directors and then the airlines and employers in there, their requirement, among other things, is to identify every single access point by airport, the purpose of the access point, the people who use that access point, and what the nature of the access is. What does it allow to have happen? In addition to identifying the number of employees that have badged access, who the employers for those employees are, and what the nature of their badged access is. Because I wanted to get a better understanding of what access means. You know, I've heard people tell me, well, you can't get below a certain number, but yet that number will be significantly higher than a similar sized airport that says I can get to a lower number. And so to be honest, I didn't feel like I had enough information to actually answer your question effectively, or to answer this committee's question. Those reports are starting to come in now. We should have all of those by the end of this month. We'll have to evaluate them. And my goal is to, first of all, get a better understanding airport by airport of what it looks like. What are we talking about in terms of access points? And
Are you just doing this within the context of the vulnerability assessment request? Because that has dropped from like 17% of airports to 13%, down to like 3%.
No, this is the entire system.
Good.
This
Thank
is
you for
all
doing
450 plus federalized airports.
That's important.
So this is every single airport that we have responsibility for. And so that's going to take some time to compile that, but my intent is to provide that report. It'll probably be a classified report, but we'll provide it to the committee, and then we can have a discussion about now what do we do and what does it mean in terms of how you manage that going forward. I suspect we'll learn some good things, and we'll learn some things that are disturbing in that, but it'll give us a much clearer picture. I just didn't think I had a clear picture, and the only way to get it is to actually go out and draw the picture airport by airport.
That's great. You said you'd do that, and you're doing it. I appreciate that. Now yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Keating. Do you have any more questions? You all set? I'd like to thank Administrator Neffinger for his thoughtful testimony, very helpful. Members of the committee may have some additional questions for the witness, and we will ask you to respond to those in writing. The hearing record will be held open for 10 days, and without objection, the subcommittee stands adjourned.